My goal is to beat Pokemon Yellow with every species. Right now, I'm getting closer and closer to that goal, and currently in my tier list, the top-ranked Pokemon is Victreebel. This is a surprising Pokemon to be in first place, at least for me, especially because poison types aren't very good in Generation 1, but Victreebel just has everything working for it. It gets Sleep Powder, a fantastic move in Generation 1 because the sleep status condition is broken. It also has some really strong stats, a medium slow growth rate, it learns Body Slam, and also Swords Dance. Things are a little bit different when I look at Bellsprout's results. Currently it's in the D tier with a time of 55 minutes and 23 seconds. It didn't do very well. Also, I will admit, I tried to prepare a stream for it earlier this year. I did an initial playthrough for the stream behind the scenes and realized that Bellsprout is really not that fun to play, so I decided to cancel the stream and stream different games instead. The question on my mind today is, will Weepinbell be more similar to Victreebel, or is it going to be more similar to Bellsprout? Also, how will Weepinbell stack up with all of the other middle evolutions that I have played in Pokemon Yellow? Right now at the bottom of the list is Pidgeotto with a time of 1 hour 25 minutes and 10 seconds. It's in the Lieutenant Surge tier, it did not do very well. On the other detached floating hand, we have Haunter, the top-ranked middle evolution. It's in the A tier with a time of 43 minutes and 44 seconds. Now, Haunter's results are so good because it is also another sleep user. It gets Hypnosis, but Sleep Powder is far better. So today, let's see how Weepinbell is going to do in a solo challenge of Pokemon Yellow. These are the rules, you can find them in the description if you need to reference them later. For base stats, Weepinbell has 65 HP, 90 attack, 50 defense, 55 speed, giving it a 10.55% chance to crit in Generation 1, and it has 85 special. Just like Victreebel and Bellsprout, it's a grass poison type, meaning it will take 4 times damage from bug moves, which is kind of scary. It also takes super effective damage from psychic type Pokemon, which are OP in Generation 1. One of the main drawbacks to running Bellsprout is that it's so slow. Outspeeding fast psychic types like the Alakazam line becomes impossible, and then even if you have Sleep Powder and setup moves like Growth and Swords Dance, it doesn't really matter. There's always the possibility to get resets because fast psychic types also like to crit. Bellsprout's base speed is 40 and Victreebel's is 70, so Weepinbell is right in the middle. And Victreebel doesn't really have any significant problems with speed. So I'm hoping that the 15 base point increase for Weepinbell is going to give it what it needs to move first throughout the majority of the game. Okay, now let's go through move pool because this one is a bit of a bummer. It starts with Vine Whip, Growth, and Wrap. Honestly, this is a pretty good set for the early game. Growth can badge boost after Brock's badge. Vine Whip means I'm going to be able to defeat him very quickly, and Wrap covers types that would resist grass type moves. And there are a lot of these Pokemon in the early game. Bug, Poison, and Flying types. Now this starting set feels like it's in the middle of Bellsprout's and Victreebel's. Bellsprout starts with Vine Whip and Growth. It does not get Wrap, but this is where things go downhill for Weepinbell. Victreebel starts with Sleep Powder, Stun Spore, Acid, and Razor Leaf. I don't know why the developers didn't give Weepinbell maybe Sleep Powder or Razor Leaf as a starting move. Also, Acid is really important. This move normally looks kind of weak and useless, but in the early game of Pokemon Yellow, it is fantastic. It's super effective against bug Pokemon because the type interactions in this game are all kinds of wonky, and it also has the same type attack bonus, and it's decent physical damage against most of the Pokemon that otherwise resist grass type moves. And speaking of them, Razor Leaf is so good for Victreebel as a starting move. It has a high crit chance, and with Victreebel's 70 base speed, it always gets them. Weepinbell, even if it started with Razor Leaf, wouldn't always successfully crit every turn, but Razor Leaf would be a better move when compared with Vine Whip. I'm pretty sure that Vine Whip's PP was switched with Absorbs when the developers were making these games. It seems like Vine Whip has the PP that a recovery move would have, whereas Absorb just randomly has 25 PP and Vine Whip has 10. This makes no sense. But it's also a big disadvantage for Weepinbell in the early game because it's going to run out of PP easily. And as soon as I clear Brock on Route 3 where there are a ton of mandatory trainers, that is going to start becoming a problem. Okay, so I have to start strategizing for him. I have some choices here with Weepinbell. I could battle optional trainers in the forest with Wrap, defeating their bug types and leveling up. This might allow Weepinbell to move first against Brock's Onix, but I don't really think that Weepinbell needs the training. It's obviously going to be able to defeat Brock on minimum battles. That said, sometimes the downside of doing minimum battles on Brock means that Route Route 3 becomes very difficult, or at very least it becomes slow. A good example of this is any water type that has Bubble for Brock, they immediately start struggling once they get to Route 3. One quick middle ground solution to this is battling the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym. He has two ground types, Diglett and Sandshrew. Unfortunately, both of them take 2 hits for Weepinbell to knock out. But because this plant has a medium slow growth rate, it is leveling up very quickly, and it reaches level 10 before I take on Brock. Geodude, obviously a one-shot. Now, I'm not faster than the Onix, even though I'm level 11 now by the time I reach it. That doesn't really matter though, because unless it spams Bind over and over again, which it has no AI script to tell it to do, it's not gonna win. So I just choose Vine Whip, it goes for Screech, and then I knock it out. On Route 3, I'm gonna cut out all the battles so that we can watch my PP in the top left. After fighting the Bug Catcher and the Youngster, I make the strategical choice to battle the Lass next instead of the Bug Catcher. He has 4 Pokemon, whereas she only has 2. I am doing this to conserve my PP so that I can last longer. I do have to quickly backtrack to the map's edge so that I can reset her position to move past her. This is faster than fighting the Bug Catcher would be, and it also conserves my PP, allowing me to make it by the final Bug Catcher on the route and make it to the Pokemon Center outside of Mount Moon. In this area, I end up fighting 2 optional trainers. The Super Nerd near the entrance of the cave over by the rare candy, and then the Hiker because I can knock out his Pokemon very quickly using Vine Whip. At the end of the cave, I have to go up against a bunch of poison types, but Wrap is really helpful here. I should go through how this move works in case you're not familiar with Generation 1. In these games, trapping moves prevent the opponent from using their attacks, and as long as you're moving first, you can infinitely trap the opponent, provided the move doesn't miss. With 85% accuracy, Wrap misses occasionally, but it's not the worst thing. The only downside to using this move is it's quite slow, and as a timed challenge, this is not the best. You can see that here as Weepinbell is fighting the Fossil Nerd. During this battle, it levels up to 18, and now it can learn Sleep Powder, which is one of my favorite moves. I think it actually is my favorite move in Generation 1. I make a lot of jokes about Hypnosis being my favorite move, but as a kid I used a lot more Sleep Powder because I was a Butterfree guy. Jesse and James, more poison types and more slowness. I should mention here that Weepinbell's speed interaction with the Meowth is kind of funny. It has 31 speed, whereas Meowth has 32. Because of that, the Meowth can outspeed me and use Growl, potentially lowering the damage from Wrap, which would make the coughing significantly slower. Luckily, it didn't go for this. Alright, Cerulean City, I think the choice is obvious here. I should be facing Misty next. I go straight for the junior trainer. Now, this is potentially risky because her Goldeen does have Peck. That's at a crit with Vine Whip, so it goes down to a single hit. Alright, now time for the second gym leader. The strategy here is obvious. Set up with Growth against the Staryu as it spams Tackle over and over again, then do massive damage with Vine Whip, and I should be able to one-hit her lead and then two-shot her ace. I went up to +3, but this is obviously overkill. I do manage to get the Staryu in one hit, and I just barely don't get the Starmie in one hit. So I only need 2 growths here in order to two-shot, and there's not really a chance that she's gonna knock out Weepinbell, even if her Starmie is critting every turn with Tackle. The Rivallon Nugget Bridge is next. Weepinbell is faster, so I can outspeed with Sleep Powder or with Wrap. I think I should have gone with Wrap. Sleep Powder ends up missing. I just use Wrap on the next turn and knock it out without getting growled. That's good. Vine Whip one-shots the Sandshrew. It just barely fails to knock out the Rattata, but from here the battle's much easier. I trap the Eevee using Wrap, I get a critical hit, and in Generation 1, each subsequent hit does the same amount of damage. So over 3 hits I do massive damage, and on the next turn Eevee faints. Route 24 and 25 are essentially a longer version of Route 3. I do have to backtrack to the Pokemon Center to heal here because Vine Whip and Wrap just don't have enough PP. During this section of the game, let's make a comparison with Weepinbell and Gloom. In my tier list, Gloom did not get a good time, although I'm sure if I came back and ran it again, I could slightly improve these results. Right now it's sitting in the E tier with a time of 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 16 seconds. One of the reasons for its underperformance, especially in comparison with Victreebel, is the fact that it learns Acid at level 28, and before that the only attacking moves it has access to are Absorb and Bide. So that's one way Weepinbell is differentiating itself from the other middle stage grass type. Wrap at this section of the game is really helpful. And while Weepinbell does learn Acid 1 level higher, it's not too far away now. On the SSN, I do the safe play and pick up Rest. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to skip Body Slam because Weepinbell doesn't get it. I think that is the biggest flaw that this thing has. It feels very similar to Tentacruel. It gets access to Swords Dance, but then no good physical moves for synergy. I was actually thinking of my Tentacruel route while playing this initial Weepinbell playthrough, which I completed back in June. Because Tentacruel was on my mind, I really wanted to see how Wrap would fare for Weepinbell. After all, in combination with Swords Dance, it can be quite potent as long as you're outspeeding your enemies. So if you start to wonder why I'm holding on to Wrap, this is why I'm thinking about Tentacruel and how useful the move was, especially against threats like the champion's Alakazam. Okay, back to the run. The rival was really easy on the SSN, so now let's take on Surge. This man is pathetic, and even more so today when using a grass poison type. I guess the scariest thing that could happen here is a critical hit from Mega Kick, but I still think Weepinbell would survive that. I played pretty conservatively, putting the Raichu to sleep and then setting up with Growth before attacking with Vine Whip. It's not doing great damage. Also, using Wrap when the opponent is sleeping is never a good idea because it gives them more time to wake up from sleep. Every time Wrap hits, it's essentially another turn, so Sleep and Wrap don't combine well together. And that's probably a reason it's going to be less good with Weepinbell when compared with a Pokemon like Tentacruel. Now conveniently we're on the subject of Wrap, so let's continue talking about it because the Wrapping Lass is next. She doesn't have AI Modification 3, and due to the ordering of type combinations in Generation 1, that would force her to use Poison Powder with every single one of her Pokemon against Weepinbell. But in this case, she's just randomly choosing her moves, so there is a risk of her Oddish using Stun Spore on Weepinbell, and then the Bellsprouts constantly using either Growth or Wrap. This frustrating strategy is where she got her name. I can play around this by using Sleep and then Wrap on the Oddish. I don't think this is ideal. I figured that out by the time the second Oddish comes in. I just spam Wrap, knock it out, and from there, it's an easy win. Okay, Rock Tunnel is really easy. I have super effective damage against most of the Pokemon. While the Slowpoke does no confusion, it's not really a threat because Weepinbell has great special. Before it comes out though, I have to choose, am I going to teach Acid? And in this case, I decide to pass it up. I want to keep the Growth Vine Whip combo. Sleep Powder is going to be critical for the late game, and I was also invested in the Wrap strategy for this playthrough. I crushed the Self-Destructing Hiker, then on my way to Celadon City I have to fight this one Gambler who has 2 fire types. They're both irrelevant though, provided Wrap doesn't miss because Weepinbell is faster. Now if I had done this first playthrough with Weepinbell after I had done all the optimization with Ivysaur, I think I would have skipped the rare candy in the Rocket Hideout. It's probably not necessary with a Sleep Powder Swords Dance user. By the time I reach the department store, I have accumulated a lot of money. Actually so much that I can buy 5 vitamins. In more recent playthroughs, I have not been accumulating this amount just because I've cut a bunch of extra bloat. Since Weepinbell is fairly slow, I buy 4 Carbos to boost its speed. This leaves enough stat experience space that I can still use other Carbos that I pick up for free on the map. To use the last amount of money, I buy Calcium to boost my special, which helps both offensively and defensively. The rival in Pokemon Tower is next. This is an easy battle, but there's a funny interaction here. He has AI Modification 3. The Fearow at the beginning of the fight knows Mirror Move, which is a flying type move, so it's always going to spam it against Weepinbell. If I use Sleep Powder and then miss, there is a chance that the Fearow will put me to sleep, which would have been funny because then it would spam Mirror Move over and over again, repeating Sleep Powder even though I'm asleep. By the way, most trainers in Generation 1 have AI Modification number 1, which I rarely talk about. It just prevents them from using moves that inflict a non-volatile status condition as their primary effect when the target already has a status condition. But in this case, Mirror Move's primary effect is not inflicting a status condition, so the Fearow would just continue to use it. I have learned this year that when you get hit by Sleep Powder, it wastes a lot of time, way more than you would think. In a lot of these runs, I'm afraid of getting fast resets, even against Surge or Blaine, but what I have been noticing is that even if I win after getting put to sleep, it usually wastes more time than a fast reset. As we move into the final year of Pokemon Yellow playthroughs, I'll have to do more testing around this. In a scenario where I get hit by Sleep Powder right away, maybe it is more time conscious to just reset right away. Anyway, the rival's really easy, so now let's head up Pokemon Tower. On my way, I have to face this trainer, Agatha Jr. She is an absolute menace in this video, but I'm going to talk about her more later. For now, the basics are pretty simple. I have to use Growth and Vine Whip to knock out her Ghost Poison type. types. This is slow going, of course. I'm exposed to status conditions from Lick and Confuse Ray along the way, and fixed damage from Nightshade. In this case, using Sleep Powder, Growth, and Vine Whip, I'm able to pull through with a victory. No resets here, at least for now. Jesse and James at the top of Pokemon Tower is the perfect example of how frustrating Weepinbell is to play in comparison with Victreebel. The fact that Victreebel would have Body Slam by this point in the game makes both Arbok and Weezing faster to knock out, but with Weepinbell, I am relying on Wrap to take care of them, and you can see that this takes a lot of time. By the way, Wrap is a move that I never used as a kid because I found it so frustrating. The fact that you could knock out the opposing Pokemon without taking damage is really cool and all, but this move wastes so much time. And when you're stuck playing the game on 1x game speed as a small child with ADHD, this move is essentially just not usable. With the Rockets defeated, I have to take on another trainer with poison types, Erika. Acid would be helpful here. I would have super effective damage against the Tangela, and then neutral damage against the Weepinbell and the Gloom. Plus, Acid has a 33% chance to lower defense, which would speed up my progress if I got lucky. Anyway, if I want to keep Wrap for the late game, I'm just going to have to go slowly through this battle. It's annoying, but it's possible, and I defeat Erika on my first attempt. By the way, due to her AI, her Weepinbell and Gloom are only ever going to choose Acid against Weepinbell. It's neutral, and it doesn't do that much damage, so I never have to fear for something like Sleep Powder or Stun Spore, which is usually why Pokemon lose to Erika. Winning here gives me access to the Mega Drain TM, which is a big upgrade from Vine Whip. But I'm not going to teach it right away. Instead, I'm going to Silph next in search of another TM. I defeat Machoke Candy, he's an optional trainer, then the mandatory Arbok trainer, and with him out of the way, I go north on this floor, unlocking the door and quickly grabbing a protein before heading over to this teleport pad by the one Rocket who has a single Hypno. Through here is floor 7, and just beyond this door, which I have to unlock with the card key, is the TM for Swords Dance. Now I make what I think is a mistake here. Instead of teaching Swords Dance, which I initially experimented with, I instead teach Mega Drain in the place of Vine Whip, and then I go into the battle against the rival. This is pretty sketchy. I can kind of see what I was going for here, but I don't really like it as a strategy. First of all, the Sandslash has Poison Sting, so it is locked into this move. There is no need for me to be using Sleep Powder here. I can just set up Growth essentially for free against the Sandslash, then knock it out in one hit with Mega Drain and heal all of the damage it would have dealt with Poison Sting. Since I'm a poison type, there's no way for it to poison me. Now, the mistake I made here during this battle is that I didn't set up to +6. If I had done that, then I would have one-shot the Cloyster and avoided Aurora Beam, which does massive damage. Then Magneton comes in and knocks Weepinbell out with Tackle. That's my first reset of this run, and it's exclusively because of player error. I figured things out in the next battle, setting up Growth all the way to +6 on the Sandslash, and then I one-shot the Cloyster. Mega Drain doesn't have enough damage to one-shot the Magneton, but as long as it doesn't use Supersonic, it can't mess me up. Having an increased special stat is very helpful for the Kadabra that follows, because it's going to use either Confusion or Psybeam, which both don't do much damage. Flareon is last, and this is where my strategy kind of falls apart. I have to take things slow here. Mega Drain is doing about a quarter. I end up using Wrap here just so it doesn't use Fire Spin and trap me, wasting my time. Okay, so I have some questions. Jesse and James are next, but I still don't have Swords Dance. Giovanni follows them, and I still don't have Swords Dance. After that, I head back to Koga's gym. By the way, there's this juggler just inside the entrance who is mandatory. Knocking his Pokemon out without Swords Dance takes a long time. Why didn't I teach this move? I genuinely cannot figure it out. Anyways, let's go into the Koga battle and see how this goes with Growth. My strategy here was to use Wrap to knock out the first Venonat, then Sleep Powder on the second one. I felt that was a little bit safer because it can use Psybeam instead of Psychic, and then my special won't get dropped. Although it doesn't really matter because I can just use Growth to restore it. In the end, this fight is possible with Wrap, but it's slow. It would have been faster with Swords Dance. I make it to his final Pokemon, Venomoth. It outspeeds, hitting with Psychic. Not very nice, honestly. I put it to sleep, and this is where my strategy just kind of falls apart, as you can see. Wrap and Sleep Powder are working against each other. Venomoth outspeeds Weepinbell, so I think I'm lucky that I pulled through this one with a victory. Okay, now I realize why I was holding on to Growth. The reason is I wanted to have it so I could boost my special against Blaine and then shrug off his fire type moves. He is one of the best gym leaders in Pokemon Yellow, and also Growth gives me more turns to badge boost to get my speed faster than his fire types. So all of that ends up being very ironic when I finally go up against him. Ninetales is first, Sleep Powder, then Growth as much as possible, and after I've used 3 Growths and been taken to orange health, I am now faster than all of Blaine's Pokemon. So with Swords Dance, I would also be outspeeding. And if I'm moving first, then I might as well have boosted my attack stat to use Wrap to knock out all of his Pokemon, so Growth is also not particularly ideal here. Although I get quite far with Wrap without the boost to my attack, I make it all the way to the Arcanine, then I miss Sleep Powder a bit, it uses Takedown and Weepinbell faints. Okay, I'm a Grass type, I have fantastic moves, I have collected 10 rare candies to this point, so I'm just going to use a bunch of them now to boost Weepinbell up to level 52 before fighting Blaine again. The growth strategy does not work, so I come back into the battle for my 3rd attempt with Swords Dance. This is so much better, by the way. Wrap is doing tons of damage now, it takes less time to knock out each one of his Pokemon, minimizing the risk from Wrap missing. And now with the second most powerful move in the game, Weepinbell defeats Blaine on its first attempt using this strategy. So we know now, don't use growth in the mid game, it's not as good as Swords Dance. Before Sabrina, I fight some optional trainers in her gym just to level up to 53 so that I can retain my badge boosts for her. I'm faster than the Abra, so I can put it to sleep with Sleep Powder and then set up with Swords Dance, and hopefully then sweep the rest of her team using Wrap. I do just want to mention how much this weak normal type move does to the Kadabra. It almost one-shots, which is really impressive. Alakazam is last, it doesn't get a chance to move, and with that, she's defeated. Okay, we're doing rapid fire gym leaders now, so let's roll the intro for Giovanni. Going into this fight, check out my moveset. Mimic has replaced Mega Drain. Now Giovanni is a little bit funny because once I defeat the Dugtrio and the Persian, this fight is essentially free. Due to AI interactions, the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking will only ever use Tail Whip or Leer against a Grass Poison type. And then by the time I make it to the Rhydon, Swords Dance boosting my Mimic to Earthquake should do enough damage. The issue here is just setting up, because Weepinbell is slower than both the Dugtrio and the Persian. The first of these Pokemon can use Fissure to one-hit, or Dig or Earthquake to get critical hits. Persian, on the other hand, can use Slash to deal massive damage. Essentially, if I put the Dugtrio to sleep, I'm probably going to win because I can set up with Swords Dance, boost my speed, Mimic Earthquake, and then knock it out. Unless it wakes up too soon, uses Dig, and knocks me out with a critical hit. So that's my second reset here. On the 3rd time around, I finally am able to Mimic Earthquake, and from there it's an easy sweep. Well, not exactly. The Persian survives on a tiny amount of health because I got a critical hit. Remember, in Generation 1, whenever your Pokemon crits, it actually does less damage than if you set up just one time with Swords Dance, because the critical hit modifier approaches 2 but never reaches it. Still though, the normal type doesn't get me, so I one-hit the following Nidoqueen, the Nidoking, and move on to the Rhydon. Here, Weepinbell gets a critical hit, so the Rock type survives. Rhydon uses Rock Slide, but it doesn't do enough damage. Rival 6 has a Sandslash. He has good AI, he has Poison Sting, so I can set up with Impunity here using Swords Dance and then sweep the remainder of his team, provided I don't level up and lose my badge boosts along the way. If I did, my speed stat would revert, and at the beginning of this battle I have 117. However, if I leveled up, I would still probably outspeed the Kadabra because it has 118. What I'm trying to say is this fight's very easy. Well, provided I can get a move that actually has a boost from Swords Dance. Slash isn't an option because crits will bypass my stat changes, but I can mimic the Sandslash's Swift and then use this to knock out the rest of his Pokemon. It's slow for the Cloyster because it's pretty defensive, but after that I one-shot the Magneton, the Kadabra, and the Flareon. Right now Weepinbell's time has just gone over the 50-minute mark. Okay, bring up the tier list. Here is Victreebel's time, 36 minutes and 27 seconds. Right now, it feels like Weepinbell is vastly underperforming. Some of that's definitely inexperience, but I think I can confidently say now that Weepinbell is more similar to Bellsprout than it is to Victreebel. That said, I don't think it needs any additional training. I think it has all the tools it needs for success against the Elite Four. Okay, I am known as a stubborn player. Often I will commit to a strategy and then keep using it way after it has worn out its welcome. That's the case here, and we can really see evidence of that as I'm using Wrap against all of Lorelei's Pokemon. This just cannot be the ideal strategy. I think in this case, even Acid would be better. At least it would be faster. If I was gonna lose, I would just lose and then try again. If you're worried about not being able to trap the Pokemon, just use Sleep Powder on every turn. It feels great, by the way. Sleep Sleep status, amazing in Generation 1. I highly recommend it to anyone who has not played these games before. It starts to become kind of trash in Generation 2, which I think is why a lot of people don't like it. Anyways, give it a try in Generation 1, even if you have a move like Sing or Hypnosis. By the time I'm fully set up, Wrap is doing okay damage, I guess. Like, I get a critical hit against the Slowbro, so then Wrap does even less. I also took damage from Psychic. I make it to the Jinx, knock it out in only a single Wrap, which is convenient, but then I miss on the Lapras. It hits with Blizzard, and I waste all of this time. Here's the thing about my current approach. As we go into the second Lorelei fight, I want to mention a downside of my current approach. While I am being stubborn, there aren't really any fallback plans for Weepinbell to utilize. I could teach Takedown or Double Edge, but both of those moves are kind of bad, and recoil damage is not how I like to play, especially now that I've given up Mega Drain, my only recovery option. Well, unless I teach Rest, but then my moveset is starting to get crammed. It would be like Rest, Sleep Powder, Swords Dance, and Double Edge. That won't work because we have Agatha coming up. So I would have to keep Mimic as my only damage dealing move. And then I only have 9 PP to use every battle. I already have enough PP problems, so I don't need to make another one. I lose once again to the Lapras when I miss with Wrap. This is getting really frustrating. Anyways, I do stick to it. Now let's examine options for potential mimics here in this fight against Lorelei. I could mimic Takedown from the Dugong, Spike Cannon from the Cloyster, Double Slap or Thrash from the Jinx, or Body Slam from the Lapras. In this case, I choose to go for Thrash from the Jinx, and that's what allows me to knock out the Lapras in a single hit. Okay, silly music. Do 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 do. It's time for the Hiker. You might be concerned that I don't have a special move here. It doesn't matter, I can just mimic Dig from the Onix, set up with Swords Dance, and then sweep his team. I'm absolutely certain that there are never going to be any problems for Weepinbell in this fight. Absolutely certain. Okay, Agatha's next. Now I did use 3 PP ups on Mimic for this fight because I'm going to be stealing Lick from the initial Gengar, so I have super effective damage against the ghosts. Before doing that, I set up with Sleep Powder and Swords Dance. The reason I do things in this way instead of mimicking the move first is so that I badge boost myself as much as is possible. Then if the Gengar wakes up and attacks, I will take minimal damage while trying to re-establish Sleep Powder. From there, my attack stat is ridiculous, 652, and I can deal decent damage to the remainder of her Pokemon. I use Wrap for the Golbat, Lick for the Haunter. Weepinbell gets the one hit, which I wasn't expecting. Then I use Wrap on the Arbok. She switches it out, breaking my combo, so I have to use Lick against the Gengar. I just barely don't one-shot, but Agatha is basically a foregone conclusion. Unless the Gengar confuses me, Weepinbell hits itself with an outrageous attack stat, and I go under half health in only one turn. I have to chance the confusion again, and it doesn't work out for me, so I get a reset. If and when confusion doesn't ruin my day, this fight is straightforward. I beat her on my next attempt. Okay, time for Lance, the Dragon-type trainer who loves his Flying-type Pokemon, especially in Yellow version. Unlike in Red and Blue, where Aerodactyl doesn't have any Flying-type moves, in this game it knows both Wing Attack and Fly. I make a mistake here at the beginning of the fight setting up against the Gyarados because I'm about to level up. I think I should have put it to sleep and then knocked it out, and then set up on the first Dragonair so I could have my badge boosts for the Aerodactyl. Without them, I am going to be moving second. Also, I wasn't really sure what to mimic during this fight. I end up mimicking Hyper Beam because it synergizes well with Swords Dance, and Ice Beam's a little bit far away. This powerful normal type move lets me one-shot both of the Dragonairs. Aerodactyl chooses Wing Attack, it doesn't do much damage, and I use Hyper Beam, crossing my fingers, hoping that even though it's resisted, I'll have enough damage. In Generation 1, there is a quirk. If you knock the opponent's Pokemon out with Hyper Beam, you don't have to recharge. But if I fail to knock the Aerodactyl out, I will have to. In this case though, Hyper Beam has enough damage, so I move on to the Dragonite. Hyper Beam one-shots it as well. Time for the final battle of this run. Will Weepinbell be able to do it under an hour? I think so. The champion leads with Sandslash. This is a Pokemon that has caused so many problems for me throughout the year. This year started with Electrode and Magneton, and it is so refreshing using Weepinbell here because the only thing Sandslash can do is spam Poison Sting. Yes, it is never going to choose Earthquake. Essentially, I can set up for free with Swords Dance. This means I have enough speed to move first against every single one of the rival's Pokemon. After my setup is complete, I mimic Earthquake, and then I begin the sweep. One shot on the Sandslash, one shot on the Alakazam, Alakazam. I have to 2-hit the Executor. Luckily it misses Hypnosis. It's going to prioritize this move every time against Weepinbell when it doesn't have a status condition just because of my typing. Still, Earthquake is able to 2-shot, so from there it's easier. Magneton's a 1-hit, Cloyster's next. I could have used Sleep Powder here to avoid Ice Beam. Luckily though, the Ice type does not freeze me, and my Earthquake got a critical hit, so my next one does more damage, and I make it to the rival's final Pokemon. It's Flareon, and of course, Earthquake easily one-shots. Weepinbell clocks in with a first playthrough time of 58 minutes and 43 seconds, with 8 resets, 0 blackouts at level 62, with a game time of 3 hours and 34 minutes. This is not the playthrough I was hoping Weepinbell would be capable of, but I was trying out Wrap and it didn't work out for me. I know that there is a much better way for me to play with Weepinbell. I'm going to try something new now, which I think is going to be a better approach to explaining Weepinbell rather than my typical approach of going through the footage and describing all the damage ranges, etc. as we go. So this is RBY-XP Router, the software that I use to root out all of these playthroughs. I'm going to quickly describe the software to you and then talk through the Weepinbell route quickly before we go into the footage. Hang in there with me, this is all going to make sense in a second. So in the top left, we have all of the controls that allow us to add events to the route. So we could add in a trainer, for example, an item, a wild Pokemon, and then we can also filter the results by specific events. So if I want to see where I use rare candies, I can click this and then it will only show me the events where I use rare candies throughout the route. That leads to the bottom left, which is a list of every single event that takes place in the playthrough. So as I'm playing with this enable recording button selected, it will write down every single action I take in the game. Once I complete a playthrough, I am left with a file that looks like this, having every single event that I did in the run. Then I can go in and modify things. Let's say I don't want to fight this Chandler, even though she's mandatory. I can still just take her out and then it will recalculate experience yields and stat experience throughout the remainder of the run. Of course, we are going to fight her, so I'll just check that again. On the right hand side of the screen, we have 2 tabs. The pre-event state, so this shows you the state of your inventory and your Pokemon before the event takes place. And then we have the battle summary tab, which appears whenever we are selecting a battle within the route. This shows us damage ranges for the battle. On the left hand side, we have my Pokemon's damage ranges, and on the right hand side, we have the enemy Pokemon's damage ranges. When there are multiple Pokemon in a fight, like here against Brock, you will see my Pokemon as it exists in the battle at that moment against the enemy Pokemon. If I level up from knocking the Geodude out, that is reflected in this root file. So you can see that now my Weepinbell will be level 9 facing the Onix, and its damage ranges and Onix's damage ranges will be calculated using that new level, stat experience, and stats. The router also does some logic highlighting the move in green, which is going to deal the most damage most consistently. So in this case, Vine Whip for Weepinbell and Tackle for both of Brock's Pokemon. Another small thing that I've never really described is the numbers under the move. So here it says 40 to 48 for Vine Whip. That is the exact amount of damage it is going to do. And then it shows a percentage of the opponent's health. So 138 to 166% damage to the Geodude, or 106 to 125% damage to the Onix. The numbers that follow on the next row are in the case that Vine Whip gets a critical hit. And the number that follows that is the number of turns, followed by the percent chance that I get that knockout in that number of turns. So it's better to look at Geodude here. If it was able to somehow attack Weepinbell for 5 turns, it would have an 80.3% chance of knocking Weepinbell out. Also, just so everyone knows, if we want to see what would happen if I used 1 growth, we can go up here and use setup moves. It's a nice little drop-down menu that you won't be able to see due to how I'm capturing this footage. But once I select growth here and I click apply move, you will see that the damage ranges will recalculate. Note that the critical hit damage range does not change because crits bypass stat changes. When I do work on these routes, I like to view them in a very specific and more concise way. I don't want to see the fact that I purchased a Pokeball, 9 potions, and a Paralyze Heal from the Viridian City Mart. That's just too much information. Instead, I'm going to select to only filter by fighting trainers and using rare candies. This dramatically reduces the number of events that I have to look at throughout a route. I have also, for convenience sake, highlighted in this green teal color all of the optional trainers in my Weepinbell route. You'll notice as I scrub through this route that I have eliminated all optional battles except 3. Each one of them is present in the route for a specific purpose. The first hiker inside of Mount Moon is there just so I can have enough speed to move first against the rival's Spearow. If I remove this hiker from the route and go back to the rival's event, you will notice that Weepinbell then speed ties the Spearow. This makes Wrap much less effective at knocking it out without taking damage damage from Peck or getting hit by Growl, which ends up messing up how fast I can knock out his final EV. The second optional trainer is the Gentleman on the SS hand to get access to a rare candy. I figured it made sense to fight him, even though he has fire types. And then the final optional battle in the route is the Rocket inside of Silph so that I can get access to the rare candy. Essentially, I fight the Hiker to outspeed the rival, and then I fight 2 optional trainers to get access to 2 more rare candies. One of the funny things about this route with Weepinbell is the fact that the mandatory bug catcher inside of Viridian Forest ends up being one of the trainers that requires the most optimization. Without any turns of setup with growth, Vine Whip has a 32.6% chance to 9 hit. This is not acceptable when the Caterpie has a 78.2% chance to 5 hit using Tackle. Now it has a 50-50% chance of also using String Shot, so I hope that it will use some of those moves, otherwise Weepinbell will lose this fight. The strategy I ended up going with is trying to minimize the total number of turns in battle. If I use Growth just once, then you'll see that Vine Whip becomes a 6 hit, so 7 turns total in the battle. If I use Growth twice, then I have a 98.4% chance to 5 hit. It's also going to be a 7 hit. If I set up Growth one more time, so 3 growths, then Vine Whip has a 62.2% chance to 4 hit, but it could also 5 hit, so the battle's going to be between 7 and 8 turns. This is slightly worse than using 1 turn of growth or 2 turns of growth. What I ended up settling on is using growth twice. This is better because I save PP on Vine Whip and then I can head straight to Brock right after. Fighting Brock will cost 2 uses of Vine Whip, and I didn't root in the junior trainer for extra experience just because he's not necessary, and I also want to save as much PP as possible for Route 3. As you watch the footage of me going out onto Route 3, I want you to be aware of the fact that my PP is kind of low, at least for Vine Whip, but I'm going to have just enough to get through the entire route and proceed to Mount Moon. Now it obviously makes sense to fight Misty before taking on the rival. If I don't set up with growth, Vine Whip is going to 2-hit the Staryu, and then it's likely going to 4-hit the Starmie. That would be 6 turns in battle total. If I set up twice with growth, then Vine Whip will 1-shot the Staryu and 2-hit the Starmie. By doing this, the total number of turns in battle is only 5. Okay, rival on Nugget Bridge. For this, we're going to have to shrink the footage down just to make space for all of the battle damage ranges. By the way, the reason we're trying this new style in the video is because I've got some feedback saying these battle damage range graphics can be kind of hard to interpret, so I'm hoping that by making the footage available at the same time you're seeing the damage range, and I can also point to things with my mouse, it's going to make all of these numbers a little bit more comprehensible. Let me know in the comments if you think this is a good approach to take in the future. In the case of this battle, I want to use Wrap on the Spearow since I've done the one optional battle to outspeed it. Beyond that, Vine Whip for the Sandshrew, it has a 26.6% chance to 1-hit the Rattata, and then I go back to Wrap just to save Vine Whip PP for the remaining trainers on Nugget Bridge. For this section of the game, I do have to do 1 Pokemon Center heal, and the best time to do it is after the first 3 trainers on the route. You can see that the software recorded that Pokemon Center heal right here, and then it's followed by the remainder of the trainers on Route 24 and Route 25. Okay, let's talk about fighting the Gentleman on the SSN. This fight takes a while because Wrap takes multiple hits to knock out his Fire-type Pokemon. By the way, the Wrap damage ranges listed here are what it deals in 1 turn. So it has the chance to deal between 2 and 5 times this amount of damage per use. The thing about fighting this trainer is I get my 3rd rare candy for the playthrough, and this is important for Weepinbell. If we look here on the left hand side of the screen, you can see a bunch of other numbers pertaining to the playthrough. When I defeat the rival's final Pokemon, it says levels up into after final Pokemon. What this means is that I will level up after defeating his final Pokemon, and then I will be level 27. I am going to use 3 rare candies to go up to level 30 prior to facing Lieutenant Surge. Also, because of how I taught my moves, I can spam A and teach Acid over Wrap in Weepinbell's first move slot. No saves going into Surge because he is absolutely trivial, especially when using Acid. It has a 20% chance to 2-hit or a guaranteed 3-hit. The next thing that I really need to mention is Agatha Jr. This fight was terrible for me in my follow-up attempts. It's also one of the reasons we are doing this new format for the follow-up run, because I lost so many playthroughs here because I just refused to save in front of her. I didn't want to take a reset, but this fight is risky because I have to use Acid to knock out her Pokemon. In this case, the damage ranges aren't very good, as you can see. It's usually going to be a 3-hit. Do note that these damage ranges do not account for the fact that Acid has a chance to drop defense, so my chance to 2-hit or 3-hit is slightly higher than it appears here. The loss condition here is what it usually is: getting paralyzed by Lick, confused by Confuse Ray, and then knocked out by Nightshade. Okay, next we're going to Silph because we need to get access to Swords Dance. Unlike before, before, I'm going to teach it right away before the rival in Silph. Now I'm going to make the footage just a little bit smaller, kind of over to the right so that we block his damage ranges, but I want you to see Weepinbell's damage ranges here against him. After setting up with Swords Dance, this is how much damage I'm dealing with Acid. I have a good chance to knock out the Flareon in a single hit, an okay chance against the Magneton, and a guarantee against the Kadabra. The thing that's really unfortunate is the Kadabra's damage range, so we're going to move the screen over now. You can see that Psybeam has a 20.3% chance to knock out Weepinbell even from full health. This fight caused me so much pain in my follow-up runs, because the Kadabra really likes to crit, and when it crits, Psybeam always gets the one hit. Also, if it crits with Confusion, it still does between 79 and 93% damage. Okay, Juggler in Koga's gym. If I set up Swords Dance once, then I one-shot all of his Pokemon using Acid. It's pretty straightforward to make this fight much easier and faster than it was when using Wrap. Koga is not quite as straightforward. After setting up with Swords Dance 3 times, I have an 89.5% chance to one-hit all 3 of the Venonats, and I have a 98.9% chance to 2-hit the Venomoth. Because of its damage range with Psychic, which deals between 60 and 71% damage in a single hit, I think that using Sleep Powder on turn 1 is the safer choice. After defeating Koga, my Weepinbell is level 41. I'm going to use a single rare candy now before fighting Blaine. Once putting his Ninetales to sleep and setting up Swords Dance 3 times, I still do not have 1-hits on his Pokemon. They're all 2-hits essentially. 98.9% chances against the first 2 and an 80% chance against the Arcanine. But remember, it also has Reflect, so to counter out things like this, I'm going to be using Sleep Powder against all 3 of his Pokemon to make the fight a little bit more consistent. Now, that's saying a lot because this fight isn't consistent. I have many resets here in so many of my follow-up playthroughs. This was one of the fights that I was targeting to try and get good luck on, because there just isn't really a better way for Weepinbell to beat him. Leveling up more doesn't make sense. I can do it at this level, and the odds are pretty good. But you'd all be surprised how many times Sleep Powder likes to miss. Actually, maybe you wouldn't be. You're probably going to tell me that sleep moves are awful. Just train more with Weepinbell. No, that is not the right choice. With Blaine defeated, you'll notice that I level up after his final Pokemon. This allows me to use 4 rare candies to boost Weepinbell up to level 47 before taking on Sabrina. Now we're going to walk through this very carefully, so look right now at the beginning of the battle. Weepinbell is slower than the Abra, the Kadabra, and the Alakazam. But as I use Swords Dances, the software will calculate the badge boosts. After a single Swords Dance, I outspeed the Abra. After a second Swords Dance, I outspeed the Kadabra. And after the third one, I am able to outspeed the Alakazam. And I have an 89.5% chance to knock it out in a single hit. This brings us very close to the ending of the route. Against Giovanni, there is the same complicated situation against the Dugtrio and the Persian where things can go wrong as Weepinbell is trying to set up with Swords Dance. Also, after I use Swords Dance 3 times, my damage ranges are all outstanding here. So overall, he's a straightforward trainer. You just have to get a little bit lucky, like against Blaine. For the rival prior to the league, I'm going to mimic Swift and set up Swords Dance 3 times, but it is important where I do this. As you can see, I level up after defeating the Sandslash and the Execute. This takes away the fact that I can outspeed the Kadabra. The routing software is not correct here, saying that I have the outspeed. I'm going to bring up the footage now so you can see exactly what I do. 1 Swords Dance on the Sandslash and the Execute. I mimic Swift, knock them out, and move on to the Cloyster. I level up here, then I can put it to sleep, set up Swords Dance 2 more times, further badge boosting my speed stat, and that allows me to outspeed the Kadabra and avoid Psychic. I'll move the gameplay out of the way now and show you Psychic's damage range because it does a lot to Weepinbell. Between 51 and 60% damage after 3 uses of Swords Dance for badge boosts. So that's if I badge boosted after knocking the Execute out. And with a critical hit, both Psybeam and Psychic will one-shot Weepinbell. Okay, for Lorelei, we're going to take away the damage routing software because we can go back into the footage now and talk exclusively about this run. I am really happy with the solution I came up with for this fight. It's kind of wacky. So I knock out the Dugong and then level up going into the Cloyster. This allows me to then put the Cloyster to sleep, set up Swords Dance here, and mimic Spike Cannon. I use this physical move to knock out the Slowbro, the Jinx, and the Lapras. Although the last of these I'm going to put to sleep just to avoid Blizzard. Okay everyone, we have reached that time in the video where I go up against the Hiker again. This time around, I put his Onix to sleep, mimic Dig, and I also have Mega Drain for this fight because my moveset has worked out in a much better way this time. The issue here comes against the Machamp. Weepinbell gets a critical hit, and so does the Machamp when it uses Strength. So I guess Weepinbell is going to get a reset here. No, it's not. It's going to survive on 15 hit points and knock the Machamp out. For Agatha, I realized that I have to use 1 or 2 PP ups on Mimic in order to have enough uses of Lick to get through this fight. Using Mega Drain to knock out the Golbat or the Arbok is not a good way to play this fight. Now, there is the potential to lose here. I get unlucky being paralyzed by the Arbok. As a result, I do have 1 reset to her before I finally defeat her on my next attempt. By the way, just before fighting her, I used 1 rare candy. This ensures that I don't level up mid-battle against Lance. Well, I will level up after the Aerodactyl, as you can see here in the routing software. I'm going to show you the damage ranges again because it's important to see how good Hyper Beam is here. By mimicking this move and setting up with Swords Dance 3 times, I have an 80.5% chance to knock out the Gyarados, the Aerodactyl, and the Dragonite, with 90% chances against both of the Dragonairs. And with Weepinbell leveling up after the Aerodactyl, provided I take my time and get hit by 1 Leer from the Gyarados, I will have enough speed to move first against the Rock type. Going back to the footage, I didn't know that I should be doing this in this playthrough. The Gyarados can be kind of annoying while you're trying to get hit by Leer. If it crits with Hyper Beam, then you're just gonna lose. These kind of resets are frustrating. Also, if the Gyarados does attack with Hyper Beam, it tends to be more time efficient to just reset right away rather than playing the fight out. As you can see here, my Weepinbell is on low health by the time I arrive at the Aerodactyl, then it uses Wing Attack, does a lot of damage, but in this case, I hang on, and then I crit the Aerodactyl. So I would have won if I didn't crit. As a result, I take a reset. By the way, in the next fight, the scenario is almost identical. I am once again on 11 hit points. I knock out the Aerodactyl, level up, I have 3 more speed than the Dragonite, and I can finish it with a single Hyper Beam. The champion is so easy with this moveset. Mega Drain, Mimic, Swords Dance, and Sleep Powder. I should not be putting the Sandslash to sleep. This is exclusively a mistake. The only 2 Pokemon that I want to put to sleep on the champion's team are the Executor to avoid Hypnosis, which can waste a lot of time, or the Cloyster because getting crit by Ice Beam or Frozen feels absolutely terrible. That said, that's maybe more of a stylistic play for me because you can just 2-shot using Earthquake. In the end, I get the job done with the Sleep Powder strategy. I knock out the Flareon, and that gives me Weepinbell's final follow-up playthrough time. 46 minutes and 41 seconds with 11 resets, 0 blackouts at level 58, with a game time of 2 hours and 48 minutes. I am personally really disappointed in this result. I tried so many times after this run to get another playthrough, but I just kept failing. Here are the timeline graphics for all of my playthroughs. I completed a total of 5, but I did way more attempts. Most of them ended in Pokemon Tower at Agatha Jr. or at the rival in Silph. I kept playing every time after I got by him, but then Blaine, Lorelei, Lance, and the champion can occasionally throw out resets. Well, Agatha too, but those ones actually feel less likely. In the end, my third run was the best, but not by much. You can see the runs 2 to 5 all trend around a similar amount of time. This is the same no-nonsense route. 3 optional battles, 3 rare candies for Acid before Surge, 1 rare candy after Koga, 4 before Sabrina for the outspeed on the Alakazam after badge boosts, and then 1 before Agatha and 1 before the champion. This is the route summary, including optional battles, just in case you want to try it out yourself. I really think that Weepinbell can get a much better time. If we look at the game time graph, you can actually see that my 4th playthrough with Weepinbell was my best. If you're wondering why there's variance in game time between all of these runs, remember that the early game I have to use Wrap, and it is highly variable in the number of turns that it affects the Pokemon, and also in the amount of damage it does. If you get a critical hit, then you will get through a battle much faster. And if you miss a bunch, then you'll get through a battle much slower. So here's a screenshot from the end of my 4th playthrough with Weepinbell. The best game time that I achieved was 2 hours and 44 minutes. If we take the total number of game time minutes, which is 164, and divide that by 4, then we will see the optimal time that Weepinbell could have got through that playthrough if it had no resets. In that case, it would be able to achieve a time of 41 minutes, which is honestly just completely outstanding. That said, I didn't have any more time to play Weepinbell, so today it's going to be ranked on its 3rd playthrough's result. With a time of 46 minutes and 41 seconds, today Weepinbell earns itself a placement in the B tier. It's behind Clefable and just ahead of Raticate. In terms of 2nd stage Pokemon, this is not an amazing or outstanding result. Haunter, Wartortle, and Ivysaur all are ahead of it in the tier list, with even one 1st stage Pokemon outranking it, and that's Poliwag. But speaking of Poliwag, what about Poliwhirl? I think it just might be the best middle evolution in all of Pokemon Yellow. So tomorrow, I'm gonna come back and do a run with it. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much, it means the world to me. I'll see you tomorrow when Daily December continues. Okay, it is time for Oak. And in this case, I was expecting it to be pretty easy with Weepinbell since I have access to Sleep Powder and Swords Dance. You know, it's going to be the same stuff we've been seeing through the majority of this playthrough. Although, there's one real big problem here for Weepinbell. It's quite underleveled. For example, Oak's Tauros is level 66 and Weepinbell is only level 58. The other thing is I didn't optimize my experience curves specifically for this battle. I'm never planning for Oak. I just do this for fun at the end of the run. And I try not to train or teach any new moves for it. Within those constraints, things are quite rough for Weepinbell. I can put the Tauros to sleep and then set up with Swords Dance, but there's a problem because Oak's team always has one Pokemon that is a duplicate typing. He either has 2 water types, 2 grass types, or 2 fire types. I always go up against the team that is most difficult. 2 fire types, and he also has 2 flying types because of the Gyarados at the end of the battle. This is where things get really bad. I don't have a particularly good move to mimic in this case, but to have something that's physical that deals neutral damage to pretty much everything, I'm going to steal the Executor's Stomp. I don't want to have to deal with recoil damage from takedown off of the Tauros. And the Arcanine also only has takedown. Plus, waiting for the Charizard isn't going to work, because I lose my badge boosts right after I knock out the Arcanine. And as a result, Charizard is faster and can knock me out using either Fire Spin or Flamethrower. I had to reset quite a few times before I realized that it's not going to work to set up fully on the Tauros at the beginning of the battle. Instead, what I need to do is put the Tauros to sleep, set up twice, then I can outspeed the Arcanine, putting it to sleep and knocking it out without taking damage. This allows Weepinbell to just barely survive the damage from Flamethrower, put the Charizard to sleep, and then set up one more time so that I outspeed the Gyarados. It's quite annoying. In order for this to work, Charizard needs to not crit with Flamethrower, which does happen. It also needs to not burn me with Flamethrower, and it can never attack with Fire Spin and have the move connect. Otherwise, it will one-shot me if it uses Flamethrower or just do massive damage using subsequent Fire Spins. The ideal scenario here is it uses Flamethrower on the first turn and I survive putting it to sleep, or it uses Fire Spin and misses. Eventually, after a total of 18 resets, finally I put the Charizard to sleep and I can knock it out with Stomp. Having set up with one more Swords Dance, I am now faster than the Gyarados. I had to decide here, do I want to put it to sleep or 2-shot with Stomp, leaving it room to crit me with Hyper Beam? I think that I can say I have learned a lot this year because I decided to not put the 5th Pokemon in this battle to sleep. I just use Stomp. Maybe I'll get a flinch. In this case, I don't. Then Gyarados chooses Hyper Beam, and it does massive damage. But Weepinbell hangs on with red health, and I knock the Gyarados out. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow for Poliwhirl.